Okay, guys, so Freak by Suburban's really blown up lately. I personally really enjoy the song, especially the production on it, as well as the songwriting and composition. So I've actually remade the instrumentals here, just for my own personal benefit to kind of see what exactly he did and trying to learn something from it. And I've decided to share with you guys, and hopefully you guys can learn from it as well. A quick disclaimer before I start is I cannot and I will not be able to replicate the exact sound, but I'll try to replicate the energy and kind of break down some of the techniques used. If it's some simple stuff like low passing, high passing, reverb, I'll try to go through it pretty quickly. But if it's something really interesting, I'll go a little bit deeper into it. You can hear the full beat here. I'll insert the timestamp there if you want to check that out. And yeah, I'll get started. All right, so let's get started with the introduction of the song. And I'll play you a little bit of the original, just a little bit. Hopefully I don't get copyright strikes. Welcome to our freak show, come meet my monster. Okay, that's enough. Okay, so first things first, you hear a little bit of vinyl noise. That's pretty obvious. And you hear a little kind of a reverse vocal sounding effect. How you would do that is, I'm just going to use an example. I'll play the... Moving out of focus. Let's say you want to kind of create the similar effect with this vocal here. How you would do it is you take the first syllable of the vocals. Maybe remove the little thing. So you have that, right? And what you do is you just give it a huge reverb. I usually use Valhalla. ValhallaRoom does perfectly fine. Say give it like a huge kind of a there. So and then you resample it. Right, so that sounds like that. But when you resample it, you get a pretty long tail, right? You go into here, you reverse the sample, and you take the tail of that, which is reversed, about there, maybe a little bit like that. And now you remove the reverb on the original vocals. So you end up with something a little bit like this. Moving out of focus. Usually, it's a bit rough here, but usually you will ramp it up using some sort of volume envelope. I'm not going to do too much because time. And you'll put a reverb on it as well to make it sound more smooth. That's already fairly smooth. Yeah, so that's how he does that. He uses that throughout the song quite often and gives it that kind of dreamy / creepy sound effect, whatever you want to call it. Get rid of that. And besides that, you hear his vocals, obviously, at the start. And then you hear this little key thing. And the way I try to replicate that key thing is using a Mosaic Keys preset from Heavyocity in Kontakt. It sounds like this. It sounds pretty nice, but not quite there. So what I try to do is I try to give it that a bit of vibrato. So you can't really hear that much, but if you can hear that is really modulating the pitch, giving it that wobbly type of effect. And then I put a low cut on it to clean it up a little bit. Compressor for sidechain later. And this auto filter effect essentially cuts out the lows and highs for the intro because the synth gets used later in the drop. And to give it that kind of radio sounding effect, which the same effect is actually applied on his vocals as well. And then I gave it a little bit more room using the ValhallaRoom. And lastly, there's this reverse effect, which essentially gives it a little bit of a spice towards the end. I don't think that's the exact sound, or I don't even think that it sounds that similar anyways to the original, but I do think that it kind of captures the energy similarly. And then I put a ticking sound, which sounds like this. And that's just from Virtual Riot sample pack. And I buzzed everything together, put an RC20 on it, just for the intro and the outro, to give it a little bit of a vinyl feel per se. Cool. And everything together sounds like this. Pretty easy, pretty simple. Let's move on to the next section.
My patience running thinner on this melting clock. Cerebrum jail with thoughts most would consider odd. To think you're any different from an...
Man, that slap looks like it really hurts. I won't play the whole thing though. You probably already heard it a few times if you're here. Starting with some little subtle things. Transitioning from the intro and the verse, you can hear these clown / carnival / evil laughing sounds in the background, and I think that it really does a lot for the theme and kind of establishing the atmosphere. So that's a really cool little subtle thing. And then you hear these bells. The way I try to replicate it is I used a Ableton stock sound called this one here, if you want to have a good look at it. I applied the same vibrato treatment to it as well, OTT as usual. Some pretty subtle settings there. EQ just to trim out a bit of the highs, and compressor for sidechain, and Valhalla for a bit of space. Simple. And then I have these strings here. Again, also Ableton stock sound. String Celtic cello quartet, I think, with a bit of reverb and a bit of EQ to trim out the highs and lows. And altogether, sounds like this. Not too bad for Ableton stock sounds. And then I have another Ableton stock bass running through a distortion rack. Again, I think you can find this in one of the free libraries that Ableton lets you download on their website. I am low passing it, automating the filter frequency, essentially opening it up as the song approaches the drop, and it sounds like this. And towards the end, you can probably hear there's a little bit of a tape stop. With tape stops, there's a lot of free versions online. You don't really have to use this one. But I have the whole Kiloheartz collection, and everything sounds great. Before I move on to the drop, I just want to quickly talk about the way that his voice is recorded here. Because if you go back and listen to the section, you can hear that there's a lot of breath. There's a lot of air in it. And that is, one, his style, two, an intentional choice to kind of create the tension in a way. And I'm 99% certain that the way he's created this airy sounding vocals is through what we call a breath track. So what this does, or what this is essentially, is the same vocal lines recorded, but without, the melody. Think about ASMR. So you basically do the same vocal line, but you whisper. So that's what is really weird, but layering that on top of the vocals essentially gives it a bit of energy and air. And towards the end of the verse, it actually basically turns the whole vocal into a breath track. Really interesting stuff. I have not heard anyone do this in their production.
Can't help myself.
So let's start with the pluck first. Sounds like this. It's basically the same sound from before in the introduction, without the reverb and the auto filter, basically making it a much cleaner sound. And Suburban is known to kind of do this, where he will make the build up really aggressive and big sounding, and then pretty much cut it down to something raw, much more minimalistic in the drop / chorus. And Ray's vocals really sit on top of this super well. I believe they've recorded her multiple times and then panned each take left and right. making it really wide stereo sound. And I'm fairly certain they used the breath track as well to give that high end a boost too. And then they actually used her breathing as a little bit of a flare, or like a little feel element towards the end of this repeat of the chorus. Like, then we have the 808, which sounds like this. So there's actually a pitch wheel modulation, pitch wheel automation here on the first note, making that a pretty common drag down sound effect. The 808 itself is from Sublab, just a preset, tweaked some of the settings, and then I used the EQ to cut out some of the mud because it was really boomy. Then I used the compressor to make it duck to the kick, and the combining with the kick, the 808 sounds like this. So you can hear how much punch is adding to the kick with the, how much punch is being added to the 808 with the kick. And then we have a snap, which sounds like this, with a Valhalla space modulator on it, which gives it a stereo sound. Basically pans it to the side, which is what the original had. And ding. That is a very interesting sound. I really have not heard that being used too much, but it really suits the song's aesthetic well. In the second repeat of the chorus, in this part, when the Suburban and REI comes in together, we've got this percussive thing. And this doesn't really sound like what they have in the original. I think what they used in the original is like some sort of industrial bang sound, but I couldn't really find anything quite like that. Altogether, this section sounds like this. This section, I feel like really shined through as kind of the spark of the whole piece. Really, is with the strings and the percussion and the orchestral percussion. It just sounds really, really, really grand and super well done in general. So what's done here is actually removed the key / pluck from before, but he's added a kind of like an impact synth, is what I would call it, to lay on top of the 808, and it sounds something like this. This is a really rough synth, but essentially it's something that's like layering on top of the kick / 808 and giving it a bit more decay and giving it a bit more fatness to it. The way that I did this is just a bass preset from Serum. I think this is one of just the default presets. I added reverb and delay, and then I EQ'd it. I took out some of the lows because that's going to clash heavily with the 808 and the kick, and then I sidechained it as well so that none of it clashes with each other, basically. And one other thing you would definitely hear in this part is the string. Obviously, I think the one that's in the track is recorded. I don't have the privilege of recording live musicians for Remake, so I just used the Ableton presets, and it sounds like this. And what that is the same string from before, a little bit higher on the register, and using the pitch bend function to bend it down, I believe 5 semis. That's that. And then there's another note that hits like this. And lastly, we have this element here. This sounds so much weaker compared to what he has in the track. Essentially what I think this is some sort of orchestral drum, or maybe like a marching band snare, doing some quick fills. Really moves the track along and combines beautifully with the strings. And altogether, sounds like this. So in this section, the drums definitely take the lead instead of the little plug thing from before and the big orchestral sound from the previous section. I believe part of the reason for that is to clear room for Rei's vocals, which again, I gotta mention is super, super clean, and the performance is really well done. She's got a great voice. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing really special about this section. It really is just the drum pattern being a little different. And I'll play that right now. So essentially the pattern of the 808 and the kick changes, and towards the end of each repeat of the 808 pattern, there's a little pitch up for this note here. Really subtle, but I feel like it like, again, is such a small thing, but I feel like it blends well when the next note comes in and then it pitches down. It's like bow, bow. That sounds really stupid. But yep, that's the drums, and you've got some nice little string solos here as well. That sounds like this, with that Ableton stock sound. And transitioning from that previous section to this section, you've got this reverse orchestral thing, orchestral hit thing that sounds like this. And that is just a Kashmir orchestral hit reversed with no effects on it. Pretty straightforward. So let's skip ahead to this section here. Reason for the skip is after that REI AMI section, nothing really gets introduced, well, nothing new really gets introduced. But in this section, you get introduced to this, I guess, like monster sounding vocals. And the way he's done it essentially is by toning down the fulminant on the sample. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this tool. If you're not familiar with it, you've probably already seen it somewhere. Essentially what this does is you can turn down the fulminant of the voice, and using a Somatics vocal example here, we can hear. If you really want to go overboard with it, you can even tune down the pitch as well. It will sound like this. Gets really dirty quickly. But yeah, that's this section. I really love how, you know, Suburban's almost having a, I guess, internal dialogue, or like a dialogue with his monsters. That bridges into one more repeat of the chorus and the song ends. All right, I think that pretty much covers everything. If you want the project file, let me know in the comments. I will most definitely upload it soon. And yeah, this sounds great. I've had a blast remaking it. I've learned quite a bit in the process as well. And I hope you have learned something as well watching this video. Let me know what you think of the video format. Let me know what you think of Suburban. And definitely let me know what other songs you want me to remake next. I will try to get that done if I can. Stay safe. I will see you in the next one.